Hey, this is Mark Henry, author of Dancing with Energy, Healing Magic, and Mysticism, here to talk to you more about the occult and the paranormal. Well, today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the technique for psychic prediction and sports betting. We actually did a video on this topic last week, if I'm not mistaken, and I just wanted to, after explaining the principles from last week, I kind of wanted to give you a technique to play with that you can use in order to try your hand at this. Because this is all about learning about yourself, your abilities, and possibly making something happen. Okay, but before we begin, as usual, I just want to remind everybody that I just put a couple new attunements into my attunement Etsy store. So if you want to level up your magic, enhance your life, and improve yourself and your capabilities, then check out the store. I recently put in an attunement called the Genius of Relationship. So this particular attunement uses six spirits working together. So you're attuned to them collectively and individually to help you create, nurture, and enhance relationships. So check that out. Also, I added a goetic spirit named Phoenix. So if you want to increase your charm, music ability, writing ability, things like that, he is your guy. He is a poet, and he is quite the charmer. So, and he's very loyal to his students. So anyway, if you want to check those out, I'll put a link in the description at the bottom, and you can look into it. But let's move on. Okay, so this particular video, we're going to review a little bit about what we went over last time, and then I'm going to give you a technique that you can try to make all this work. Okay, so I talked about uh, principles of sports betting, specifically in regard to psychic abilities, using psychic impressions in order to work with that. So let me kind of go over a little bit about what we talked about. Number one was to avoid fear and excitement. See, we have to pick up impressions from our psychic senses and extreme emotions, especially fear of loss, excitement. Those can be very strong emotional responses, and they can interfere with that signal where it gets all kind of muddled, and then you're having to sort through all of that for those impressions. So that's number one. Number two is to bet only the amount of money that you can afford, or don't bet at all when you're trying this out. Just look and see which particular what event's happening, and then try to come up with an outcome. This particular thing kind of hangs people up because they might try out first and betting a whole bunch of money, but really here we're just kind of experimenting and we're kind of seeing what's happening. So third is don't lust after results, meaning that you have to have a little bit of detachment from the outcome, and we try to foster that by one, possibly betting on a team or people, if we're dealing with boxing or MMA, for example, and people that we possibly don't know or don't have any emotional investment in. Because again, it's getting back to what I mentioned, and that is that your emotions can um, contaminate this process. So how do you do it? How do you go about doing this? What is the technique? Well, if you have your own technique, if you are a tarot card reader, if you tune into spirits, if you use any other type of divination, you can certainly work with that. I'm not telling you not to do that, but I will share a technique that you can use. But in the meantime, here is a new principle. And this is a very important one. Psychic information is likely to have a different quality than the regular sensory data that you get from picking up information from the outside world. This is the key. This is probably the most important principle, because when you can detect what is different from your psychic information than ordinary sense data, then you'll be able to more easily identify what it is and tease it out from your normal sensory experiences. So, what does this mean? It means that your psychic data may come to you with a particular feeling attached to it. It may come to you with a particular visual quality or size or maybe even a sound. But this is something that you have to kind of work on, and the only way to do it is through trial and error. I would even get a notebook, and then when you work with this process, write down the impression that you get of what might be a psychic impression. And then see if over time, over a number of bets, if there is a commonality, a common thread between the ones that are hits, the ones that were accurate. Make sense? Okay. That's the number one. That's a number one and probably most important principle of doing this whole process. So what is the technique? So here's the technique. So depending on what you're betting on, if it's football, baseball, or basketball, you're going to be dealing with two teams that are playing each other. If you're dealing with MMA, boxing, tennis, you're dealing with individual players playing each other. So what you do is take a couple deep breaths, go into kind of because what you're trying to do is you're trying to slow down and lower the things that are naturally kind of going in through your mind, and you're decreasing some of your physiological processes. The deep breathing for 5-10 minutes. You're kind of settling things down. You don't want too much in your mind and things in your body competing with your impressions. Okay, so once you have that, you are going to want to, as your eyes are closed, on one side of your mental screen, you're going to have the player or team, and on the other side, you're going to have the player or team that is opposing the others. So, for example, if you were doing football and you had the Atlanta Falcons versus the New Orleans Saints, and you'd have them almost like a split screen, okay? And kind of hold that for a few seconds. You don't have to do it long. It's really not, it's not a big thing. But then once that you have that, you ask yourself the question, who is going to win the football game between New Orleans Saints and Atlanta Falcons? And you can even say on whatever particular date. It's important that you put, the specifics, because what might come back might be inaccurate, but inaccurate to what your intention was, but accurate towards what was actually happening. It might, for example, let's say that the New Orleans Saints won against the Atlanta Falcons earlier in the season. Well, your impressions will come up. This might come up as who won the last game. So you have to put that date. You have to be very specific with these questions. So once that you have the split screen, you have the question, and then what I do is I'll take it, breathe out, and push it back. And then just kind of let it go. Try to detach. Don't lust after results. Again, like I said, it's best if you don't have any emotional connection or strong biases between these two. And then you just go about your daily activities, right? So when it comes back to you, notice, what are the impressions that you got? What did the information give you? Write that down. Okay, now if you're happy with that, fine and good. You know, write it down, forget about it, go eat lunch, do it as whatever it is you're doing, and complete your plans for the day, and see what happens. Uh, and then record your outcome in your notebook. One of the things that can happen if you do have an emotional investment into one of these teams, for example, is that you try to forget about it, but it's hard, and all of a sudden an impression will come forward. A lot of times that's just your brain trying to come up with something, solve a problem. Our brains, that's what they do, right? You have a problem, your brain can work on solving it. Well, this is a non-rational process. So this isn't helpful in this particular case. So we're operating on a different non-rational level. So that's what you have to watch out for. And if you're not sure, clear your mind. A few hours later, try it again. See what comes up. If you wanted to try it even later in the day, see if you can come up with a consensus, whether there is multiple impressions of the same team for the same game. You can go with that. And that's about it. That's about it. Something to play with, something to experiment with. If you don't like the way that I split it up and with the exercise, then you can change it, modify it, see if you have something that works for you. Again, this is about seeing what works. All right. Well, thank you for being a subscriber. And if you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so. I'll put a link in the description to my Etsy store, the new attunements, and my Patreon. And I will see you in a future video. Thanks so much.